Karen pushed my blind sister into a bush seconds later. I showed up in full military gear. My name is Darius Reed. I served 2 tours in Iraq, one in Afghanistan, and one very long year trying to reintegrate into a quiet civilian life in a neighborhood that didn't want people like us loud, different, black, military. But none of that prepared me for what happened to my sister. Her name's Layla, born 3 years before me, and blind since age 5. She doesn't let the dark slow her down. She walks with grace, head high, cane tapping like a heartbeat. When I bought the house in Oak Grove, I moved her in with me. I wanted her safe. I wanted peace. What we got was Karen, president of the Oak Grove Beautification and Compliance Society, which sounded official until I looked it up. It wasn't. No state registration, no city charter, just a woman with a fake badge, a megaphone voice, and a vendetta against anything she deemed out of place. She once fined us $200 for overgrown landscaping. It was a rose bush, my mother's favorite. Layla kept it alive. Then came the morning of July 3rd. Layla left for her usual walk at 8:45 a.m. I was on my way back from base training, still in uniform, still carrying that rigid energy the military builds into your spine. As I turned onto our street, I heard a scream, then a crash in the bushes, then Karen's voice. "You don't get to stumble around like you own the sidewalk." I froze. Because there, on the ground, Layla lay tangled in thorns. Her cane was snapped in half. Her elbow was bleeding. Her sunglasses were missing. And Karen stood above her, arms crossed, smug. That was the moment something ancient clicked on inside me. I didn't walk, I stormed. Combat boots pounding the pavement, uniform crisp, eyes locked. Karen turned and flinched. Her voice cracked. "What are you supposed to be? This is private property." I said nothing. I knelt beside Layla. She reached out and touched my chest, her fingers grazing my nameplate. "Darius," she whispered. "I'm here." Karen started backing away. She walked too close to the hedge. "She needs to watch where she's going." "She's blind," I said, standing, "and you pushed her." "That's hearsay." I watched it happen. Silence. Neighbors began peeking out. One man started recording. Another woman whispered, "That's the war vet." Right, Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she looked afraid. But that was only the beginning. What came next would expose everything: the fake HOA, the secret fines, the intimidation campaigns. What Karen didn't know was that I wasn't just a soldier. I was trained for tactical investigation. And now I had a mission. By nightfall, Layla's arm was bandaged, her cane replaced, and her dignity intact barely. But something had shifted in her. She sat at the kitchen table, silent, tracing the edges of her tea mug with trembling fingers. She didn't even help me up. She just stood there like I wasn't human. I'd seen men break under less. Layla wasn't fragile. She was fearless. But even the strongest soldier can fall when ambushed. And this wasn't just an ambush. It was a pattern. The next morning, I went to war quietly. I started with the notice on my front door. Karen had taped it up like a sheriff's warrant. "You are in violation of OGBCS code. 14B, impeding pedestrian flow with overgrown shrubbery. Immediate trimming required. Fine, $375. E0, signed in looping cursive, Karen M. Winston, President. OGBCS." I took it down. Not out of fear, but because I needed it intact. Evidence. Because here's what I knew. OGBCS, the Oak Grove Beautification and Compliance Society, wasn't listed in the state's public database. It had no IRS filing, no municipal charter, but it sure had power over the people around here. Fake power. And that made it dangerous. My first stop was the county clerk's office. I walked in wearing jeans and a collared shirt, trying to look like any other frustrated homeowner. I asked to see any filings, licenses, or legal standing for the OGBCS. After 30 minutes of searching, the clerk gave me a confused look. "Nothing comes up, sir. Are you sure that's a legal HOA?" It's not, I replied, pocketing the printout. That same afternoon, I knocked on 4 doors down my block. 3 of the families had paid Karen fines in the past 2 months. One woman, a single mom named Teresa, burst into tears when I mentioned Layla. She told me my kids playing hopscotch was a public hazard. Teresa said, she said she could have the property liened. I didn't want trouble. Karen had weaponized fear, and she used fake law to enforce real silence. I knew I needed backup, so I called Master Sergeant Phil Gaines, my old logistics partner from Fort Bragg. Phil was now an attorney for a nonprofit that specialized in veteran housing law and property abuse cases. He picked up on the first ring. "She pushed your blind sister, hell no," he growled. "Text me the paperwork. I'll bring the fire." He flew in 2 days later, and he didn't come empty-handed. Phil brought with him 2 interns, a laptop, and 3,000 pages of case law. Within 48 hours, we had the following: a full list of properties Karen had fined in the last 6 months, pulled from screenshots neighbors sent us. A breakdown of OGBCS's bylaws, cut and pasted from other real HOAs, altered to look authentic. Bank transfer records showing payments made to OGBCS Administrative Fund, which routed to a private checking account in Karen's maiden name. That was the trigger. Phil looked at me over Layla's dinner table and said, "She's not just pretending, she's committing wire fraud and impersonation of authority." I nodded. "I'm filing the paperwork to request a formal injunction," he said, "but we'll need community testimony." So I organized a neighborhood meeting under the pretense of safety awareness. I handed out flyers door to door. Layla, determined to be seen, came with me. Her bandaged arm was visible. So was her strength. We expected 10 people. 42 showed up. We met in the cul-de-sac beneath string lights and folding chairs. No one spoke at first. Then I stood. "I know many of you have had run-ins with Karen," I said. "Some of you may have paid her. Others were just scared. But I'm here to tell you something simple. Her authority is fake." Murmurs. I held up her fake violation notice. "This is a forgery, a threat dressed up as policy, and it stops now." Layla stepped up beside me. Her voice didn't shake. She shoved me into a bush because she thought no one would fight back. "But we don't have to be afraid anymore." That broke the silence. One by one, hands went up. People started telling their stories. One man had been fined for illegal mailboxes. A teen girl was told she couldn't skateboard on her driveway because it was a noise violation. An elderly couple had their wreath removed and thrown in the trash, all in violation of OGBCS. Then came the most damning revelation. A retired school teacher, Mr. Harold Downs, stood slowly, gripping his walker. "Karen tried to buy my house," he said. "Told me it'd be easier for everyone if I left before more fines came in. Offered me 20% below market." Gasps. Karen had been trying to scare people out of their homes, then flip them using threats and phony bylaws. Layla whispered, "It's a real estate scam." She was right. The next day, we submitted our formal complaint to the State Attorney General's office. The complaint included dozens of fake citations, names of victims, bank records, videos, including the clip of Karen shoving Layla. Phil ensured it was airtight, but even airtight cases need sunlight, so we gave it to the media. The headline hit local news first: "Veteran exposes fake HOA president after disabled sister attacked." Then it spread. NBC picked it up, then CNN, then BuzzFeed. Layla's photo sunglasses on, chin raised, was everywhere. Karen's photo, not so flattering, especially once the sheriff's office confirmed they were reopening multiple cases of trespassing, coercion, and elder harassment. Karen tried to deny it. She held her own press conference alone. "They're liars," she yelled. "All of them. He's playing dress up in his little soldier outfit. He doesn't know the law. I didn't need to respond because the public did it for me." The backlash was brutal. Sponsors pulled out of Karen's charity fundraisers. Real estate firms denied ever working with her. Neighbors she used to manipulate started knocking on my door, offering testimony, receipts, support. Karen's empire wasn't just crumbling, it was burning. But the real twist that came with the property records: Phil discovered that Karen had transferred ownership of two homes, one of which belonged to a woman with dementia, into a trust she controlled illegally. We handed it to the DA, and that's when the story exploded again. The knock came at 6:42 a.m. sharp. I was already awake, doing my usual routine coffee, push-ups, scan the news. Layla was still asleep in her room, the morning light barely creeping through her blackout curtains. When I opened the door, I saw two unmarked cruisers parked at the curb and three officers standing on the lawn. "Mr. Darius Reed," the lead detective asked. I nodded. He handed me a copy of the warrant. Karen M. Winston is being taken into custody this morning. Charges include fraud, coercion, impersonation of legal authority, elder abuse, and real estate racketeering. We're coordinating with the DA now. I didn't smile, not yet, because I knew this was just the surface. Karen's arrest was quick, surgical. She stepped out of her beige townhome in matching slippers and robe, still pretending to be surprised. "You're making a mistake," she told the cameras. "I serve this neighborhood. These people are ungrateful." But the neighborhood wasn't silent anymore. They stood on sidewalks and porches, arms crossed, phones out. Some clapped, others just stared. For the first time, Karen had no clipboard to shield herself with. Inside her house, officers found boxes labeled HOA files, but they weren't city records. They were dossiers on neighbors, photos, handwritten notes, even printed out Facebook posts. She had folders with names like Harold, weak; Layla, liability; Darius, dangerous vet. One envelope simply read, "Buyout targets 2024. That sealed it. Karen hadn't just been a tyrant with delusions of power. She had been running a calculated intimidation campaign designed to squeeze families into fear-driven sales of their homes. And now it was public record. Layla was the one who insisted on speaking at the city council hearing the following week. She walked to the podium with her new cane in hand, moving with slow, steady confidence. "My name is Layla Reed," she began. "I've lived in Oak Grove for less than a year, long enough to be fined, stalked, threatened, and physically assaulted by someone who told me I didn't belong." The chamber was silent. She said I was in the way, but I wasn't. I was walking on a sidewalk in America. People wiped their eyes. Some gasped. One elderly man stood in the back and raised a fist in silent solidarity. Layla continued. "What happened to me wasn't just about being blind. It was about being different. And that's what Karen weaponized. We weren't people to her. We were targets." When she stepped back, the applause lasted nearly 2 full minutes. The council chair had to tap her mic 3 times to settle the room. Then she looked directly at me. "Mr. Reed," she said, "what do you want to see happen next?" I didn't pause. "Accountability," I said, "and prevention. We can't let another fake HOA rise up just because no one's watching. You've got to change the rules." That's when Phil stepped up, briefcase in hand, and unveiled the draft legislation he and I had worked on for weeks. The Reed-Layla Community Integrity Act. The bill proposed a public registry for all neighborhood associations, third-party oversight of community fines and fees, criminal penalties for impersonating municipal authority, a whistleblower fund for victims of community harassment. Some in the room nodded, others bristled. One older councilman muttered, "This is going to make people afraid to run neighborhood boards." Layla responded before I could. "No," she said firmly. "It's going to make them afraid to abuse them." Meanwhile, the investigation into Karen's co-conspirators had begun. Turns out she didn't act alone. 2 real estate investors were arrested for helping launder fines into discounted property deals. A retired code enforcement officer had quietly advised Karen on how to mimic legal language without crossing official lines. She paid him $500 per consultation, and then came the emails. Karen had reached out to at least 3 other neighborhoods, offering her HOA starter kits for a price. She had plans to franchise her scam. We stopped her just in time. Karen's trial date was set for early fall. Until then, she was held without bail, due to the threat of retaliation against victims. I'll never forget seeing her in court for the pretrial hearing. She looked smaller. Her blonde hair was limp. Her eyes scanned the room like a trapped animal. But when Layla and I walked in, side by side in front row seats, she looked away. That was all the justice I needed that day. But there was still more to build. By month's end, Neighborhood Truth had expanded into 4 counties. We partnered with veteran support groups, disability advocates, and city watchdogs. We trained volunteers to audit HOA practices and educate neighbors on their rights. Phil put it best in our first training session. You don't need a badge to protect your block. You just need facts and a backbone. And this time, we had both. In the following weeks, the Reed-Layla Act passed through committee with full support. It was signed into law 2 months later. It didn't fix everything, but it changed the rules. Because now, if someone wanted to create an HOA, they needed transparency, oversight, real accountability. Clipboard tyrants wouldn't get a second chance. Karen eventually pleaded no contest to 4 charges. She took a deal 10 years with no early parole and full restitution to affected families. She cried at sentencing. No cameras captured it, but Layla and I were there, and we didn't cry. We stood tall, because finally, after months of tension, wounds, and fights in the street and the courtroom, the block was ours again. The sidewalk where Layla fell is different now. The thorny bush is gone, ripped out by the roots the same day Karen was sentenced. In its place, our neighbors planted a bed of lavender and marigolds, ringed with smooth bricks donated by the local VFW. A bronze plaque sits nestled between them for Layla Reed, whose steps taught a community to see. It was the first thing she touched when we brought her there, exactly 90 days after the incident. She knelt down, ran her fingers across the engraved letters, and whispered, "I can't believe this is real." But it was, because something had shifted not just in the neighborhood, but in people. After the sentencing, Oak Grove became softer. The fear was gone. So was the fake power. What rose in its place was something no one had expected: togetherness. Neighbors who never spoke started waving. The elderly couple who'd been fined for their wreath, they started hosting Sunday porch breakfasts. Teresa, the single mom Karen tried to silence, began organizing after-school park hours for kids and invited Layla to speak at their first gathering. Layla, ever reluctant with attention, agreed on one condition: that it be about them, not her. When she spoke to those kids, eyes wide, scooters at their feet, she said, "I don't need to see you to know you matter. I walk this neighborhood like you do. I bump things. I trip sometimes, but I keep going. That's what makes this place mine. Yours too. Don't let anyone tell you different." They clapped. One girl handed her a glitter-painted rock that said, "Strong like Layla." It sits on our windowsill now. Meanwhile, I focused on building something I never thought I'd care about again: community trust. I wasn't a politician. I wasn't even friendly. If I'm honest, the Army doesn't train you to hug your neighbors or coordinate bake sales. But I knew this fear only grows when people stay silent. So I helped start the Oak Grove Council, a real one. Not a fake HOA, not a dictatorship, just 7 neighbors voted in. I served as chair for 6 months before passing it to Teresa, who ran unopposed. We didn't fine anyone. We fixed fences. We helped Mrs. Ibarra clean her yard when her arthritis flared. We checked in on Harold every Tuesday morning after his surgery. We made eye contact. That's all some folks ever wanted. The Reed-Layla Act triggered a chain reaction. Within 2 months, 5 more counties adopted similar oversight regulations. By December, the state had formed a neighborhood abuse prevention task force. Layla was asked to testify before the state Senate. She didn't want to go, but when I reminded her that her voice helped pass a law, she said, "Let's pack." We flew to the Capitol together. She wore navy blue and her best earrings. I sat in the gallery as she told a packed room of senators, "You don't need sight to know when something's wrong. You need courage. You need to trust your instincts." I didn't expect to be thrown into a bush that day, but I did expect someone, anyone, to care that it happened. And now you do. That matters. When she sat down, the entire room stood up. Karen, she's still in prison. We don't check in. We don't need to. Sometimes people ask if I forgive her. I always say the same thing. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means I won't let her live in my head rent-free. Layla, on the other hand, she forgave her. When I asked why, she said, because if I don't, I'll walk with bitterness instead of my cane. She's stronger than me. Always has been. We kept building. Neighborhood Truth launched a national podcast called Curbside Justice. Layla and I co-hosted the first 5 episodes, featuring stories from around the country, veterans harassed for flying flags, disabled tenants shamed by rogue board members, families fined for chalk drawings. The show gained traction fast. Soon, we were invited to speak at conferences, colleges, even a civil rights panel hosted by the Department of Housing. Layla became an icon of quiet resistance. I became her security, her driver, her brother, and in some ways, her student. One night, we stood outside the community center as the stars came out. She tilted her head and asked, "You ever wonder how long it'll last?" I knew what she meant. Justice is loud when it first arrives, but it can grow quiet. People forget. Time dulls outrage. I don't know, I said, but I do know it started because you refused to stay down. She smiled. I didn't have a choice. You showed up. Our neighborhood is still imperfect. The sidewalks crack, the Wi-Fi lags, a raccoon keeps raiding the compost bins, but no one's being shoved into bushes anymore. No one's being silenced. And on weekends, when Layla walks alone with her cane tapping along the curb, people don't stare in confusion. They nod because they know her, because they saw what happens when a lie is exposed by truth in combat boots. The night Layla was given the National Civil Courage Award, she wore the same earrings she wore to the state Senate small pearls, gifted by our mom years ago. I watched her from the wings of the auditorium, heart pounding like I was back on deployment. But this mission wasn't mine. This time, she was the one out front. The hall was packed elected officials, activists, student leaders. Her name was projected in gold letters across a giant screen, Layla Reid, for transforming tragedy into national change. When she stepped to the podium, the crowd quieted instantly. She paused, cane resting against the podium, one hand on the microphone, and breathed in. Then she said, "I never asked to be known. I asked to be left alone, to walk in peace, to use the sidewalk like everyone else. I was pushed because I was inconvenient, but I didn't fall alone. My brother caught me. My neighbors caught me, and eventually the law caught up too. Justice shouldn't take a camera, or blood, or a lawsuit, but when it does, let it become a torch." They stood, every one of them, and in that moment, the girl who used to quietly count her steps became a symbol of change. We flew home the next day to find our porch overflowing with cards and hand-painted letters from school children across the country. Some said I stood up to my bullies like Layla. My grandpa uses a cane too. I helped him file a complaint. I want to be strong like her. Layla read everyone aloud. "I can't believe they listen," she whispered. I laughed. "They listen because you spoke." That summer, she started the Walk With Me project, a mentorship initiative for disabled youth. They met at libraries, parks, community halls, anywhere with open space and open minds. She taught them not just to walk tall, but to speak loud. I helped set up tents, carry sound equipment, drive kids home. One afternoon, I overheard a young boy with low vision ask her, "Aren't you scared people won't change?" She replied, "People don't always change, but systems can. And if systems change, it's easier for people to follow." That's when I realized Layla wasn't walking in my footsteps anymore. She was walking ahead of me. As for me, I was asked to speak at a veterans conference about community reintegration. I told them the truth. I used to think combat was the hardest battlefield, but try navigating a quiet suburb where your military training makes people suspicious, or worse, where your uniform doesn't protect your family. But standing up here, I realized something: service doesn't stop at the border. It begins again, Right on your front lawn. They gave me a plaque. I mailed it to our dad. I didn't need medals anymore. I had a mission that mattered. Karen never appealed her sentence. The last we heard, she was assigned to a restorative justice program, mandatory. I don't know if she'll ever understand the damage she caused, but I hope she hears the name Layla Reed every time she turns on the news, because that's what karma sounds like. The sidewalk where it all happened is now a symbol. It's part of a walking tour for high school civic classes. Layla meets them there once a month. She tells them her story, then walks them 2 blocks to the community garden she helped plant. They listen, they ask questions, they stay late to volunteer. She always ends with the same sentence: no one should need a badge or a lawsuit to be safe on their own street. Then she smiles, thanks them, and taps her cane toward home. Sometimes late at night, I sit outside with a glass of water and watch the quiet roll in. I don't worry anymore. The neighborhood's changed, not because of a big speech or a viral video, but because people learned how to see each other again, because fear lost its grip, because my sister got pushed and then stood up with the whole block behind her. We didn't just survive what happened. We rewrote the rules. We turned sidewalks into symbols, clipboards into cautionary tales, and fear into federal reform. Now, whenever a young veteran asks me if it's possible to serve again after war, I say this: yes, serve your block, serve your people. And when someone pushes your family, make damn sure the next step is justice. The end.